Well, welcome everyone to our online champagne event. I'm Terry. I work in the community and member participation team here at our co-op, working hard with my team to bring you, our members, closer to the business that you own and the products that you love. So tonight's event's being recorded for those who couldn't make it. So if you prefer not to appear on the recording, you can always leave your camera off. You can also find the recording available on our YouTube channel, in case you want to watch any of it back yourself too. I'll be sure to share the details for that in the chat later. So tonight is all about fizz, and in particular, our award-winning, fantastic tasting Les Pionniers Champagne in all three forms. Our standard non-vintage, our rosé, and the vintage as well. So tonight we're joined by Ed Robinson, one of our co-op wine buyers, along with Marine Georgelet, from the producer of all three of these bottles in France. So tonight, the running order is Ed's going to start us off with a quick introduction to champagne at Co-op. We'll then bring in Marine to talk a bit more about these bottles, where they come from, how they're made, which will all be led by Ed. Then it's on to the tasting. So Ed and Marine will be taking us through these bottles and offering pairing suggestions, tasting notes, how to get the most out of tasting your champagne. But don't worry if you've not got a bottle yourself, there'll still be lots of interesting stuff that we'll be covering. We'll also be sure to tell you more about the incredible member price for the Les Pionniers non-vintage that started just today. Following this, we'll go into the Q&A, which is your chance to ask these experts anything about what you hear tonight or champagne in general. As we go through the event, feel free to drop your questions in the chat and we'll be sure to pick them up and I'll ask them on your behalf later on. When we do get to the Q&A, you'll also be invited to come off mute and ask your question yourself if you prefer by using the hands up function on Teams. Right, so the hands up function on Teams is in a different place depending on what device or browser that you're using, but it should be easy enough to spot. If you have any problems finding it, let us know in the chat and we'll do our best to help. We'll end the event with a quick fire question for one lucky member on the call to win a bottle of the Les Pionniers, which Ed will cover in a second. So make sure you're paying attention to what you hear tonight. We're hoping to be done by 8 o'clock, but if we've still got some questions to get through and people are happy to hang around, we might stick around a bit longer. So that's enough for me. I'm going to hand over to Ed.
Thanks, Terry, and welcome everybody, and thank you very much for joining us on this evening, the week before Christmas, giving up your evening. It's very good of you. For the final of our online tastings at the Co-op this year. We've been on quite a journey through Port, Fairtrade, Rioja, and several others, but so we saved the best till last. Or at least, in my opinion, we have. What could be better than champagne at Christmas? So we've got three lovely wines for you this evening. If you have it, as Terry said, if you have a sample or samples at your disposal, fantastic. If not, don't worry. We'll talk you through it, and hopefully it'll be a fun and interesting evening for us all, just learning a bit more about these wonderful products. So we've got can we have the slide, our first slide, Terry? These wines are really, really important to us. They really set the tone to a great extent what we do here at the Co-op in the wine category, and they are really, really highly regarded champagnes which we're really, really proud to stock. So on your screen now you'll see a smattering of some of the awards they've won over the years, and they've been pretty heavily garlanded over the years. So Which Awards, Good Housekeeping, innumerable decanter, International World Challenge, Wine Challenge Awards, and we've won the international trophy which is the highest accolade you can get for our 2013 vintage. So we're really super proud of these wines. They've been in our range for at least 20 years. And why do they call them Les Pionniers? That translates into English, of course, as the pioneers. And the link here is to Rochdale, believe it or not, the Rochdale Pioneers, the starting place of our starting points of our cooperative group. So yeah, lovely wines. We've been dealing with Compagnie Champenoise for the last 20 years. I'm very happy to say that joining us this evening, all the way from Champagne, is Marine, who was born, in her own words, born and raised in Champagne. So if I think I've got the best job in the world as champagne buyer for the Co-op, I'm easily usurped by Marine, who's got everybody's dream job, I'm sure. Welcome, Marine, and thank you so much for giving up what I understand is your child-free evening to be with us this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, and thank you so much for the introduction. It is my pleasure to be with you all tonight to hopefully share a little bit of my passion and knowledge about our beautiful region and about Les Pionniers tonight. Sorry, I don't know if you can see my bottle, but I definitely have mine.
So welcome, Marine. Thank you again. So the first question then, let's start at the beginning. What is champagne? What makes champagne champagne? And I believe, Terry, you've got another slide for us while we talk this through.
Right. So this is probably the question that we get the most when we have visitors here in Champagne is why is Champagne so special and what is it? Well, part of the answer is right in front of us with this map. So as you can see, Champagne is the purple region on the northeast side of France. So about like 150 kilometers away to the east from Paris. And what is Champagne? Why is Champagne special? Champagne is obviously a sparkling wine, but a very special sparkling wine for several reasons. First, we are ruled by one of the strictest appellation in the world. So this appellation will define all the rules that we champagne makers have to follow to be able to literally put champagne on our label. The first main rule that the appellation defines is the geographical area where we are able to grow vines to make our champagne. Outside of those boundaries that you see on the map that is displayed right now, you can grow vines in your garden if you feel like it, but you will never be able to call the wine that you're going to make out of it champagne, simply because this is not part of the appellation. So this is the main rule. Then the second rule is that we are only able to grow 3 grape varieties to make our champagne. And I'm sure you probably know a little bit of those grapes that are Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Meunier. So this is simple. 3 varietals, the geographical area, which is 34,000 hectares. And it's very interesting because you have to think that those 34,000 hectares, it sounds big, but it's not that big if you consider that this is the only area that has to provide for the entire world in terms of champagne production. And every year, I might spoil one of the next question, Ed, but we produce about 300 million bottles of champagne. Half of those bottles are staying in France. Yes, we are big champagne drinkers in France. Half of those other bottles are going all around the world, including in the UK, which is part of the top 3 first markets for champagne. So you guys are also huge champagne fans, apparently. Um, One of the other things that is extremely important and that makes champagne champagne is one French word that you may know, and if you don't, I'm going to define it for you, is the terroir. Terroir is Terroir, and it's basically the combination of a type of soil, of a specific climate, and of sun exposure, soil elevation. So all those different criteria combined are going to make a terroir unique that is going to be suitable to grow vines, to grow grape, and that are going to give this specific taste that we have, that we find in champagne. And I mean minerality. Our soil is made of chalk, that white rock that will give all the minerality that is so unique that we find in champagne. And then all the different climate elements that we find in champagne that are going to give us this very unique terroir. So I've got just one fun fact that you may be aware of as people from the UK, is that the champagne terroir is unique, one of a kind. But there are some places in the world where you can find similar terroir to the one that we have in Champagne. One of those, which is probably one of the most famous one and one of the closest that we can find, is actually located in the southwest of England, and that's why you also can find some very good sparkling wine from the UK. But still, it would never be able to be called champagne because it does not come from Champagne, simply. So that's to give you some kind of global introduction as to what champagne is and also why is champagne called champagne. Then we're gonna deep dive a little bit more into, the know-how of it, but in terms of, the appellation, that's what we can say for now.
Okay, for anybody on the call who's hankering after a visit, looking at this map, I can assure you it is probably the most accessible wine region you can possibly visit if you're living in this country. It's a simple flight into Charles de Gaulle, and then some 40 minutes on a train east, and you're in Champagne country. It's really, really easy to get to. So I'd urge any of you who haven't been, who'd like to go, please do think about it. It's a wonderful experience to go through. So one of my, before we get into the nitty gritty, one of my questions, we all know champagne is this a celebration drink. One of my favorite quotes is from Churchill, who says he was once famous for saying, "In victory I deserve it, in defeat I need it." It's where did we get this where does champagne get this wonderful reputation for the celebration drink that it enjoys today?
I guess it comes from the fact that champagne is just so special, so prestigious that, you keep it for special occasions, but that means, every kind of occasion that either you need to celebrate or you would want some comfort because it will bring you joy, whatever, the reason is that you had to pop a bottle. I guess that's literally where it's coming from. And the fact that champagne is so special is also comes from the way it is made. There is a lot of work going behind a bottle of champagne. Of course, obviously, the work that goes on in the vineyards. It takes a whole year, from one pruning cycle, which is going on now in Champagne, to harvest, which usually takes place in September. And then, all the work that goes behind the winemaking. It's all about blending. Champagne is a wine that is made by blend, where it's like, you have to think of champagne making as creating a perfume. You would blend several aromatic profiles, several, personalities together to end up with one unique fragrance. That's the exact same way of working when crafting champagne. We speak of crafting, so it's really an art. It requires huge skills. That's why it's our chef de cave, who is a qualified œnologist and agronomist, who really gets a whole understanding of how things work in the vineyard, but also how things work. He's a scientist, really. And he's got a nose and a palate. Those two, they are his main tools to really craft our champagne. So the huge work of blending that goes behind champagne making, and then after that, the aging time in our cellars is definitely, all of that combined, making this a unique drink, a unique beverage that I guess is, the one thing that you would want to pop to really to celebrate. And the fizziness as well, the bubbles, it's got something joyful about it.
Absolutely, so it really is the special occasion wine par excellence, and there's no doubt about that. Some people do mention in the same breath as Prosecco, Cava, and so on. We're going to go into a bit of detail, aren't we, about the production method of champagne and what makes it special. But can we just gloss over a little bit the comparison with the lesser bubbly wines, should we say, Proseccos and Cavas, and dare I say it, the English wines. But I think there's a fundamental production difference, isn't there, between Prosecco and Champagne. I wonder if we could just highlight that a little bit so people understand
Yeah,
why
definitely.
the two taste so different.
So, well, the first answer that I would give to that is, and I've just mentioned it, is the terroir, first of all. is that the unique terroir that we have in Champagne, the type of soil and the climate give us, first of all, the main criteria, the main assets, you know, the essence of Champagne. And then in terms of the winemaking, champagne has to be made a very specific way to be called champagne. So it goes through 2 fermentation, one that is done in the tank, and at Les Pionniers we use exclusively stainless steel tank to vinify our champagne. So that's the first fermentation, to literally turn the grape juice into alcohol. And the second fermentation has to be done in the bottle to turn the still wine into sparkling wine, then that will then later be called champagne. Those 2 steps are not necessarily followed by any other, you know, sparkling wine. And whether it's Prosecco or Cava, for example, you know, on some other appellation, you don't have to do the second fermentation in the bottle. It can be done, you know, just in the tank, which will give you kind of a bit more, how to say, not as precise wine in the end. You will end up in champagne with very refined notes, because this second fermentation in the bottle will give you some kind of aging criteria thanks to the interaction inside the bottle with the wine and the yeast that will be inside the bottle. And then the aging time. This is an extremely important factor in terms of champagne making. Champagne has to be aged for a minimum, and this is by law, of 15 months in our cellars here in Champagne. At Les Pionniers, we go beyond that aging time. That's a good thing with our appellation. You can always go beyond, you can never go below. And so, for instance, our non-vintage is a 2021 base harvest, which means that it's a minimum of 2 to 3 years of aging on lees. So we go almost twice as much, our champagne, we spend twice as much time as we actually need to do. We could release Les Pionniers before, but since, you know, we really we want to achieve a certain level of quality with Les Pionniers, we go beyond that. So that's, I would say, aging time in our cellars is also one of the main criteria that will make champagne stand out from other sparkling and Prosecco, whether it's Prosecco, Cava, or other kind of sparkling as well.
That's great. It's, in all seriousness, there are lots of really good sparkling wines out there. But it is that depth and complexity of champagne which is unrivaled, really. And some of the other, it's important to consider some of those other production methods, some of which are as simple as like a soda stream, or as Marie mentioned, doing all the secondary fermentation in tank. Might sound quite basic, but it has a fundamental difference to the enjoyment and complexity and depth of the final product. So I think Terry got a couple of slides for us, which is an indication of the production processes of champagne. Perhaps go into those into a little bit more detail. So here we are, and perhaps the next slide, Terry.
We can say a few words about harvest if you want.
Yes, let's go back to the
because in Champagne, and this is also one of the things that is specific to Champagne, harvest has to be done by hand, by law. You will never see, for now, a machine harvester in Champagne. This is completely forbidden. It's interesting to understand that point. There are several reasons to that. The main one is that we want to preserve the grape as a whole bunch for as long as possible, so that when the grape are pressed, they stay as fresh as possible, and we preserve the acidity and the sugar, and there is no, you know, leaking of the grape whatsoever. That's a very important point. And also, fun fact, in Champagne, we hire globally more than 120,000 people to work during harvest, just to pick, you know. So that's huge, and this is really the most exciting time of the year for us here in Champagne in September. So if you ever feel like coming to Champagne, I do recommend to do it during harvest. And really it's buzzing, you know. You have all the little cars going around the vineyard, and everybody really like working extremely hard. So harvest is a extremely strategic time of the year for us.
Yeah, and very stressful as well. It has to go right, doesn't it? And
Yeah,
it's
this year was particularly stressful, actually.
and it's quite a marginal climate, is it not? I mean, this is something which certainly vineyards in the south of England are very aware of. Some years can be absolutely wonderful, other years can be very, very trying. So it is a very northerly part of the grape growing area of the world, and so
Yeah.
it takes a lot of judgment and a bit of luck sometimes to get the right result.
Yeah, and what you're saying is even more true and has been even more true for the past few years. I've seen a question about climate change, which we will, I guess, cover later, but this is definitely something that we are right in the middle of, and that makes things even more unpredictable as it has ever been. So yes, definitely. But climate is we have a challenging climate in Champagne. It has always been the case. We have really, we used to have very cold winters with a little bit of snow. Nowadays, not so much anymore, but we used to have four very distinct seasons. And we need it because the vine will really give its best when it suffers a little. So we need a bit of everything. The hottest and sunniest years are not necessarily the best ones. It's interesting to understand we need rain, we need cold winters, and we need mild summers. So this is an interesting point that we can go back to later.
Right. So anybody who has been around a champagne house, and if you haven't, I strongly urge you to do so. You're welcome in a lot of them. You can buy a ticket and get a really amazing tour. We'll have seen what's going on in these two photographs. I wonder if you could talk us through this, because this is the most fascinating part of champagne production in many ways, I think. The old
Yeah,
and the new
so
side by side.
So we are at this point of the process. We have completed the aging time of our champagne in our cellars, which, depending on whether we are on Les Pionniers non-vintage, can go from 2 to 3 years, or whether we are on vintage, which is currently 2013, would last 6 to 8 years of aging in our cellars. Well, at the end of this process, there is something that we need to do, which is removing the dead yeast. So sorry, that's not very glamorous, but that's the reality. The dead yeast that have been very useful during all the aging because they have contributed to help the wine develop all of the layers of, of yeasty aromas, pastry, all those nice aromas that we have when we taste our champagne. Well, they come from the lees that were left in the bottle from the second fermentation. And at the end of the aging, we need to remove those yeasts because, when you and I drink our champagne, there is no sediment in it at all. It's not like a red wine. So we have two steps of our process that will help us do that. The first one is the riddling. If you can just go back, Terry, please, to the previous slide. The riddling is all about, I'm going to do that with my bottle of champagne, but don't do it. It's all about literally putting our bottles upside down and turning them gently. So back in the days, it used to be done by hand, just like you see on the left picture, where we would put the bottles on those wooden racks and gently turn them one by one. So it was extremely, hard work. One person was able to turn 30 up to 30,000 bottles per day per person. Can you imagine on your wrist? And then the second way of doing it is now the more the contemporary way of doing it is with a machine that's called a gyropalette, where we would place up to 500 bottles all in the same direction, and it's connected to some kind of robot that will gently turn. And what's the purpose of this is to collect all the sediments that are placed in the bottle down to the neck of the bottles. Basically, we're preparing the bottle for the second phase of the process, which is called dégorgement in French, disgorgement. And so disgorgement, and then we can go to the next slide. So this is what happens after the riddling, the turning. We have all the sediments down to the neck of the bottle, and then we are ready for disgorgement. I don't know if we have a slide about disgorgement. If you maybe go to the next slide. Or
No, I
we
think
can
it's
stay on the one before. Disgorgement is basically we are going to dip our bottle upside down like that in a big cold bath, minus 27 degrees, to literally create an ice cube in here where all the sediments will be stuck. And so that then we will turn the bottle back up, remove the metal cap. At this stage, we don't have the cork yet. And thanks to the pressure that we have in our bottle, because it's no longer still wine, it's champagne now, well, the little ice cube with the sediments in it is literally just going to pop out the bottle. And that's how we remove the sediments out of a bottle of champagne. And this is called dégorgement. And right after this step, we will literally top up the bottle because we have lost a tiny quantity of champagne with some champagne, the same that's already in the bottle, and eventually some sugar, depending on how sweet we want for our champagne to be. So we'll talk about dosage later, sugar level, but basically it's really at the end of the process that we decide how sweet we want for our champagne to be. We have a brut here, which means our sugar is located between 6 up to 12 grams of sugar per liter. And then the bottles will rest a little bit so that the sugar and the wine can be well integrated together. And then we will clean the bottles, label them, and then they will be ready for them to go out on the market to you guys on the co-op shelves.
It really is a fascinating process, and I saw a question about where the fizz comes from. So this secondary fermentation is what makes champagne. It's so important to it. So normally in the fermentation process, the byproducts are alcohol, obviously, and CO2, as well as these dead yeast cells. And by not giving the wine anywhere to vent, the CO2 is absorbed into the wine, as Marine has been explaining, and that's what gives it that wonderfully soft bubble, and then all the complexity. But you are left with this layer of pretty ugly sediments in the base of the bottle. It can take up to about a month, I believe, sometimes to twist those bottles into a state where they're upside down and that can be released in the way you just described. Is that right?
Yeah, so by hand, it used to be 3 to 4 weeks process. And thanks to the Giro palette that were introduced in Champagne in the late 70s, it's usually a 10 days process. So it's much quicker and much better on everyone's wrist as well.
I can't imagine what that must have been like in those early days. And then yes, the dosage. So we've removed those horrible yeast cells. The ice popped out, and then the dosage takes place. So perhaps we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so dosage is a huge topic at the moment, and I mean we could actually start a debate probably about dosage, because there are some trends and there are some different positions around dosage. Dosage will really, for us, help and round up and finish up the wine. This is something that is going to really be the last touch of the winemaker, of the head winemaker, added to the champagne. So from 0 to 6 grams of sugar per liter, we consider a champagne to be extra brut. From 6 to 12 grams, we consider it to be brut. And then anywhere beyond that will be demi-sec. And then demi-sec can actually go even more, even higher than that. But for us tonight, we are within the brut category, which is what is the most produced champagne in the world.
What perhaps a lot of people don't realise is that the amount of sugar. I mean, that can be 2 or 3 times the amount of sugar you'd have in a dry still white wine. But it's the acidity, isn't it, that you get that which champagne is known for, which masks that, and you have I think we'd all agree, brut does taste very, very dry, and that acidity is due in part to the CO2, which is there naturally. So we've now got a finished product, haven't we? And how does it taste? But we'll go on to the 3 individual products later. But we end up with a champagne, a brut champagne. And I saw a question flash up earlier about glassware. So I'm very conscious that it's very important to serve it correctly. Now, this can be an argument starting position, but I think there are some errors which which are common, or perceived errors, shall we say. So if you look at the next slide, Terry, this is a bit of a jovial topic, but the glassware and how to serve it. This is a real point of argument, isn't it, to some champagne drinkers? Which glass should we drink our champagne from?
So this is a huge topic, and it's something that's been evolving, over the years, because there are a lot of different things involved. There is, first of all, tradition. Then there is, consumers' preference as well, and the way champagne is associated with a certain glass and a certain way to enjoy it. And then there is also let's say, the more expert kind of recommendation. And I think we can all agree today that the most ideal shape of glass is the third that we see on the right. And when I say we can all agree today, I'm speaking from a maison standpoint, from really a champagne maker standing point. The best way to really enjoy your champagne at its best is with the third glass from the left. Now, let's go back a little bit in time to understand, how things evolved and where we started from, where we went from, and where we are at today. On the left, we see the coupe. The coupe is really something that's been extremely trendy, especially at the beginning of the 20th century, and I would say probably until the what we call les années folles, like the crazy years in France, and until probably the 60s. The story tells us that the coupe was actually designed after the Queen Marie Antoinette breast in France. So that takes us back way, way before the 20th century, more in the 18th century, actually. The coupe is fun. The coupe is lovely, it's playful, it's beautiful. But the problem with the coupe is that it's so wide that all your bubbles are going to escape, and all your aromas too. And also you can't swirl it. And why am I saying this? And that is also going to take us to the second option, which is the flute. Champagne, first of all, is a wine. Even if it's a sparkling wine, it is a wine. And a wine needs oxygen to open up. A wine needs some air to be able to breathe and to really release all of its aromas. So in that, if you start from here, neither the coupe or the flute will enable you to do the swirling that will help the wine release all of its aromas. So the coupe, well, first of all, let's be honest. If you raise your arm a little bit too much, you're gonna have it all over your face. It's it can be fun, but definitely not the best the best way to actually properly enjoy champagne. The flute has some interesting aspect because the flute is so narrow that it will really preserve the bubble from the bottom to the top of the glass. You will have really, like a swimming bubbles in your glass. So from that point of view, it's interesting. But try swirling your wine in a flute. Good luck. And also the flute is so narrow that the wine is not going to be able to open up. I don't know if you've tried the exercise before, but like if you try to pour your champagne in a flute and then try to smell, you're not, and then try the same thing with a different kind of glass, like this type of glass. I don't know if you can see it properly, but this, like the third glass, it's really similar to what I have in my hands. You may have a completely different experience with the exact same champagne. This is mind-blowing. I highly recommend that you try the exercise at home. And even like, honestly, if you have the choice between a flute or a wine glass, I would go for the wine glass, the white wine glass. Just because you would have a kind of a bubble shape that is wide enough at the bottom so that your champagne can open up, and usually it is slightly narrower at the top so that all the aromas will remain in the glass and they won't escape, as opposed to what happens when you actually have your champagne in a coupe. So really, we have found over the past few years, as you know, like kind of champagne experts, that we needed an in between. So neither the coupe or the flute are really suitable, but the champagne glass, which is usually not as big as a white wine glass, or even not even as a red wine glass, obviously, and slightly narrower at the top, so that really you get that in between the coupe and the flute.
I can only endorse that. I really, really strongly. To me, it was a real revelatory moment. It's different between watching TV in black and white and colour. It's a bit cheesy to say that, but if you the aroma of a wine is so important to the enjoyment of it, and it really, really does transform that when you drink out of a wine glass. I've seen Paula, one of our attendees, asking about temperature. If we can quickly talk about that, and then I think we need to move straight into the tastings. I think temperature is another contentious topic, is it not, when we're serving champagne?
Yeah, there are many contentious topics around champagne experience. Well, first, I would say the most important thing is for you to enjoy yourself. I would say there are no strict rule about temperature. There are only recommendations. Some people like and love their champagne chilled, like cold, like 8 degrees or below, or 6 or 4. Um, Again, I will kind of explain the same thing as I did with the glass, is that the colder your champagne is, well, the least you're gonna be able to smell, to really experience the aromas of it, because cold is kind of going to make them shrink. So we don't recommend to drink champagne too cold. At all costs, do not freeze it. Do not put it in the freezer. Please don't do that. Even if you forgot to chill your champagne before drinking it, if you can, please avoid that, because that can kill actually some of the aromas really of your champagne. Then we recommend for the perfect temperature to be usually between 8 to 12 degrees. So you've got some margin. Anywhere warmer than this will likely kind of spoil a little bit the experience. But that also depends on, what the weather is like at the moment. If it's if you're going through a heat wave, drink it slightly colder so that it won't warm up too quickly. Then we didn't discuss another thing that's related to both the glass and the temperature, is the way we hold our glasses. I see so often people holding their glass like that. Well, if you do that, your champagne is going to warm up twice as fast, uh, twice faster actually, than if you just hold it by, the base. This is meant to be held like this, not like this. And this is actually true for white wine as well, not just for champagne. Simple recommendation, but really it's the basic, especially if it's warm or hot weather outside, because it's going to warm up so quickly. And obviously, I don't need to mention it, but no ice in the glass. That's obvious, but I'm sure none of you have ever done that in your life.
We would never dream of it, Marine. We would never dream of it as well. So that's really, really worthy advice, and thank you very much. You've heard it here first from the expert. So please, we're all going to take attention to that. We're going to move straight to the tasting now. So we'll focus on the non-vintage, if we may. So Terry, I think we've got a slide for that. And if there's one thing to pay attention to, look at the price for this week only, ladies and gents. 18th until Christmas Eve. £15 for this wine, a wine which has won all those accolades we've mentioned before. So it really, really is a tremendous bargain. We're really, really proud of it. I'll let Marine take you through now the wine and what it means to be non-vintage, and the skill. when I went to visit, I was blown away by the skill which is involved in presenting a wine like this to be the same every year as a non-vintage. So
Yeah.
I'll over to you, Marine.
So non-vintage for us, Les Pionniers, is really the idea of our range, and I'm going to explain myself why am I introducing this cuvée like this. If we consider the range, so brut, rosé, and vintage, Les Pionniers brut is really kind of the entry level, the first one of the out of the three that we make. However, what is interesting is that it is the hardest for our winemaker to craft. Why? When you purchase this bottle, there is no year on the bottle. That's why it's called a non-vintage, because we have blended several years of harvest with one main one. In our case, this was the main year is 2021. Of 70% of the grape do come from 2021 harvest. However, we have blended several years of harvest. This means that this is kind of a multi-vintage. We call it a non-vintage, but this could also be called a multi-vintage. And now, why is it the hardest to make? Because as a consumer, you don't know when this was made. When you purchase this bottle, you don't necessarily look after, this information on the bottle because you trust Les Pionniers to provide you with an outstanding champagne experience. However, how can our winemaker do that when it's never based on the same year of harvest, and when harvest is impacted by the weather and by, climate events? Well, that's where his skills come from, first of all. And that's why we consider, and this is actually a truth, that non-vintage is the hardest cuvee to create, because this is the one cuvee where the expectations are the highest, because no matter when it was made, it still needs to taste the same, even though the grape from a year to another don't necessarily have the same aromatic profile, because depending on whether we've had a very hot summer or whether it's been rainy, well, it's you can compare, I don't know, grape to strawberries. Some years they are sweeter than some others because they don't, depending on the weather, it is affected. Same with the grape. And so the end result should be affected. However, since the champagne appellation enables us to blend several years of harvest, it's like a recipe that we can adjust year after year. But this recipe that needs to be adjusted represents a huge amount of work for our head winemaker to adjust, because he needs to know all the wines of the year by heart. So it's hours and hours of tasting of all the different wines coming from all the different sub-region of Champagne to find the perfect recipe year after year. And this is the interesting point, is that the recipe can be slightly different from a year to another. However, the taste it needs to be as close as possible to the one reference that we have, which is Brut non-vintage. So this is, a very interesting thing to understand about Brut non-vintage. It is really the hardest cuvée to create out of everything else we are creating. It's very different approach from a vintage, where for a vintage we take a picture of that year, so we want it to be different. And we will go back to vintage after, but just so that we understand really what makes non-vintage so special, and all the work that goes behind it. So as for Les Pionniers, we have a representation of the three grape varietals that we are able to use in Champagne, and about 1/3 of each is present in our champagne. So Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Meunier, they are all roughly at 33% in the blend. And we have 30% of reserved wine, which is very high and which is also a demonstration of quality, which means that 70% of the grape will come from one reference year, which in our case for this champagne is 2021. And then for the 30% reserved wine, we are going to blend several years of previous harvest prior to 2021. And this is really the flexibility that we have to adjust the recipe. 30% reserved wine is quite high for non-vintage, and it's a very good sign of quality. Most champagne you will find rather 15 up to 20% reserved wine. So it's quite high, and it will give you more layers of complexity and of pastry notes on the palate. In terms of aging, as we said, is the base 2021. We're in 2024, so it's already a 3 years old champagne, which is again twice longer than just the minimum that we need to age our champagne for. So that also explains, the positioning and the quality of the champagne. Why does it taste so good? Because it spent longer in our cellars to age before we decided that it was ready to go.
And despite that aging, I mean, it is a seriously fresh wine, isn't it? It's got it's that lovely racy green apple style to it, which I really adore, that really useful non-vintage style. And I think this is one of the secrets to this wine's success. It's the quality and depth to it, and the consistency year in, year out. I know you have a team of people who meet every morning at 11 o'clock, and they taste those component wines blind. They do blind tasting with every single day. They must have some of the most refined palates in the world. But the wine itself, if we can just touch on that before we move on to the other two, it is that very, very youthful green apple, really, really so seriously fresh style, isn't it?
Yeah. It's really all about finding the right balance between freshness. We want to preserve the fruitiness. It's fruit forward. It's mouth watering because we have a lovely acidity to it. And at the same time, it's kind of combined with those kind of layers of toastiness that we have at the back palate. So it's really a combination. At first sip, you will get that, like biting into a fresh fruit. And then as you swallow your wine, you will get, that lovely acidity, but very, very smooth. And then you start to have some layers of creaminess.
Super. I'm aware time is a little bit short because we want to leave a bit of time at the end for some questions. So I wonder if we could just briefly switch to the rosé, Terry.
Sure.
And perhaps just 30 seconds on this, Marine, just to talk us through this wine.
Yeah. So rosé, the structure is not very different from the bruts. It's like they're like brother and sisters. The difference is that we integrate 15% of still Pinot Noir to the blend to give it that lovely color, and also to bring those aromas of red fruits, of strawberry, that are going to make a lovely rosé champagne. Something that's really, kind of yummy. There is this is really the one word that comes up to my mind. Still with those kind of layers of creaminess, but really the freshness and the floral aromas are really nice on the rosé.
Super. And it's a blend of red and white, which is unique, isn't it, in Champagne?
Absolutely. We make in Champagne a rosé by blend. We are the only appellation in the world where we are allowed to blend red wine to white wine to create a rosé. This is normally forbidden. You have to do it by maceration if you want to create a still rosé in the south of France, for example.
Superb. And then finally, Terry, the vintage slide. So we were discussing this offline, and we think in the last 20 years we've had only 4 vintages of this. So we started with the 98, then the 2004, the 08, and we're now on the 2013, which is tasting absolutely fantastic, I must say. So well done, congratulations on the awards it's won. Perhaps a minute or so on this, then we'll move to some questions.
Yeah. So vintage, the right opposite of everything we just said. On non-vintage, we're trying to keep consistency as the key factor. On vintage, it's the other way around. We want to really take a picture of that single year to really highlight it in one bottle. And since we only create vintages when the year has been so amazing that it was worth not blending it with any other year, well, we consider that there is a longer aging potential, and that we will end up with with even more complexity to it. That's why vintage usually requires much longer aging time in our cellars. We're talking 7-8 years of aging on lees. So you have to think this vintage, the current release is 2013. So we're talking an 11 years old champagne. So if you really think of it, it's something that was made more than 10 years ago. So the work that goes behind it, but also patience and the projection for it makes it really special. Vintage is the only cuvée of the range that hasn't got any Meunier. We are mostly focused on Pinot Noir, 53%, and Chardonnay, 47%.
And if the non-vintage style is that really useful green apple and the biting acidity, we've got more body here, I mean, more texture. It's more luxurious, a bit not honeyed, but it's certainly there's an awful lot more complexity going on in this wine. And this is make no mistake about it, this is a wine fit to grace anybody's Christmas table this year. It certainly will be on mine. So really proud to have it. I think that brings us up. We've got about 10 minutes to go, Terry. I wonder if there is any questions, we could perhaps move to those. And if anybody has any questions for Marine, and thank you so much for talking us through those wines. I'll over to you, Terry. We'll see if there's anything from the audience.
Cheers, Ed. Thank you very much, and thank you, Marine, as well. I feel like I've learned so much about champagne, and I'm really excited to get a bottle from my local store for Christmas Day. So we have been getting some questions. I think some of them we've covered, so I will skim down. Like I said, also conscious of time. There was one of our first questions was about climate change. Do we think that climate change, this is from Paul, sorry, will climate change the taste and the quality of champagne in the future, do we think?
Well, that's a really good question. Yes and no. Yes, I mean it's a question that we can't just answer by yes or no, actually, because this is a very, very complex topic. We are already seeing today the effect of climate change and of global warming. And actually, global warming is quite an interesting term, because we don't necessarily always see temperatures go up. It's just that the weather and weather events are all over the place. That's how it translates for us in the vineyards. Now, how is it affecting the taste of champagne as an end result? Well, to give you a very concrete example, 2022, so 2 years ago, was the hottest vintage we've had in a very long time. So like we had 3 heat waves in Champagne, which is not very common. A normal summer in Champagne, temperature goes up to 25, 28 degrees, but that's about it. We've had like several peaks at 40 degrees and beyond. I mean, you probably have had those heat waves in the UK as well, I'm sure. How did that translate into the wines? Well, we have struggled to maintain the level of acidity in our grape, which is crucial in champagne making. So how does that translate literally on the end product? We could end up, if we didn't have ways, to kind of fix that, to a less fresher champagne. Freshness is key in champagne, and freshness is given by the acidity. When we have weather events like that, we are struggling with maintaining the right level of acidity. So how do? We will play around with malolactic fermentation. We will block it on some of the wines to bring some freshness back. So I'm going a bit technical to answer to that question, but there is no simple answer to climate change and global warming. So to give you a bit more global answer, for now we can still manage. It just requires a lot of extra work in the vineyard. We have to really micromanage all of our vineyards, because depending on where the vineyards are located, we don't manage them the same way. The weather is not necessarily the same on north of Champagne as it is in the south of Champagne. And as a champagne producer, we have supply all around Champagne. That's the whole point of doing a champagne by blend. You want to blend the different terroirs. So that's, I would say, an advantage. It means that when there is hail or frost, not all of our vineyards are affected because they are not located in the same place. But and we have put lots of things in place, to help nature. But at some points, we can only do so much. We work with something that we have no control on, which is nature. That's also the beauty of it, because that's what makes champagne special, and any wine. But at the same time, it also means that we are very, very vulnerable when it comes to what can we do. We can help nature, we can support it by encouraging, biodiversity, by being more sustainable, by being more respectful of our environment. But there is only so much we can do. So I don't have the answer to what champagne is going to be like in 50 or 80 years, because it depends on how we take care of our environment. We do everything we can at Compagnie Champenoise to support that cause, but there's only so much we can do. But for now, we know that we are very lucky to have our appellation that is protecting us, that is quite spread out. From north to south of Champagne, there are 250 kilometers apart, which means that this is a huge advantage. But we need to continue our efforts to make sure that we do everything that's possible to support nature with climate change.
Absolutely. Thank you, Marine. So just looking at the time now, I'm thinking, Ed, shall we do the prize draw really quickly, and then we can maybe go on to a few final questions and end around maybe 10 past, if people are happy to stick around?
Sounds a good idea. So, okay, fingers on keys, everyone. Get ready for the big question. You can win a bottle of one of these wonderful champagnes. So, we talked about some of this, or rather, Marine talked about the some of the production in Champagne and how much is made. So, the question is, how many 6-packs of champagne are produced in the region every year? No, it's not 300 million.
There we go.
Have we got the answer?
Think so. We've got 50 million.
50 million that's the right answer.
Brilliant. The fastest finger first was Adrian Phillips. Well, Adrian, congratulations. You're going to have a bottle of the Les Pionniers coming out to you. What I'll do is I'll drop my email address in the chat in a minute, and then if you can just follow the instructions there, that'd be great. Brill. I have also got quite a few links to be sharing in the chat as well, like the product pages for these wines, where you can find the recording and stuff. While I was sharing the slides, it was a bit difficult to do both, so I'll just kind of like dump them all in at the end of the event. But just to go back to a couple of questions then, just a reminder as well, you can raise your hand if you want to ask one in person. But we've got one from Peter Marion, who was asking, how long can you keep a non-vintage champagne unopened?
Yeah, very good question too. Non-vintage champagne is meant to be consumed usually within the next 3 to 5 years, as opposed to vintage, which usually has a longer aging potential due to the fact that the grape have been purposely selected for their aging potential. We know that non-vintage is champagne that is usually purchased to be consumed either on the day or within the month, within the year. But if you don't intend to have it right away, you can happily put it in your cellar or in your wine fridge to store it, to continue slightly its aging process, and then to consume it within the next 5 years. The most important point is the conditions in which you're going to store your champagne. No temperature variation, so don't go from 18 in winter through 30 in the summer. It won't preserve your champagne well, and that could actually damage the product inside. So the most important is no temperature variation during the whole time of your champagne's storing.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Okay, Next, oh, it's just moved on from me. Sorry. Next question was, have we got any hands up? No. Cool. I've lost my question. Oh, so out of the three that we've been talking about tonight, then which one would be the driest? Would it be the non-vintage, or would you suggest it be a different one?
The driest. So they are
The driest in taste, yeah.
similar. So actually, the level of sugar is slightly similar for the three cuvées. However, since the vintage is older, you would get more kind of complexity, which means that the non-vintage might feel slightly drier. It's actually not, but it's more in terms of perception, it will feel crispier, I would say, because the level of sugar is actually about 9 grams of sugar in each cuvée, so it's kind of the same level of sugar. But since the vintage is older, the dryness will be more like rounded up on the vintage. On non-vintage, you will get more crispiness, really. So slightly more acidity. So it might, I would say, in my opinion, and I don't know if you think the same, Ed, but in my opinion, that's the one that would feel the driest out of the three champagne.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's that relationship, isn't it, between acidity and sugar, which drives that perception of sweetness. And yeah, I'm totally with you. I think my others may say that others may find a greater perception of sweetness in the rosé, for example. But also the serving temperature can have an effect on how sweet or dry you think the wine is. So there's lots of variables, really.
Oh, fantastic. Just one last question, which has just popped up now. It might not be a specific question for you, Marine, but like Zed has asked, what is like? How do you join one of these harvests? So you mentioned, if you visit in September, you might be able to get involved with being part of a champagne harvest. Do you have any like hints and tips on how to kind of book onto those?
Oh, so I didn't say you can take part in harvest if you visit. I said it's an exciting time of the year to be around, but you can't just join. Like you have to have a work contract and apply to some maison if you actually want to work. No, I just said it's really exciting and busy, so it's nice to be around and to have a kind of a ride around the vineyards. But you can't actually take part to it unless you are really intending to work throughout the whole harvest, and then you might be able to do it, but it's really hard work. So and it usually takes place in September, but that depends on the years. Some years like 2022, which is an interesting reference, or 2020, we started harvesting around August 20th, so really early. And some other years like 2013, which is actually our vintage for Les Pionniers, it's the last time we started harvesting in October of that decade. So it depends on the year. We roughly know the beginning, the starting time of harvest, usually 2 or 3 weeks before.
Well, fantastic. Great. Well, we're nearly at 5 past now, so we'll draw an end to this event. So thank you again, Ed and Marine, for being on the call tonight and like just spending your evening talking about champagne. I'm very thirsty now, and I will be going finding some. Just a note to say, our next online wine event will be taking place on the 6th of February. This one's going to be at 7:30 rather than 7 o'clock start. And we're going to be covering Coop Chianti and Coop Soave. With Massimo, who's the winemaker for Fratelli Martini. So I'm going to drop the link in the chat if anybody wants to book onto that one in advance. It's not been promoted properly yet. I wanted to try and get it ready so we could share it on the event tonight. But do keep an eye out on the Co-op app and in Co-op emails throughout January if you need a reminder or want to find out any more information about the event. Other than that, thank you everyone for coming tonight. We really hope you've enjoyed it. And yeah, we'll hope to see you at a future event. I'll leave the chat open for another minute or two in case anybody wants to scroll up and grab any links or anything. And I'll probably close the call fully at about 7 minutes past. So that's all from me. Ed and Marine, thank you very much. I'll see you at the next one.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and happy Christmas to you all.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
So, bye.
Bye-bye.